The old wagon creaked and groaned as it rolled down the dusty trail. 12-year-old Lucy sat in the back, holding tight to her only treasure, a small cloth doll her real mother had made for her before she died. The hot Montana sun beat down on her face, but inside her chest everything felt cold and empty. Her stepmother Helen sat up front next to the wagon driver, her back straight and her face hard as stone. Helen's 2 boys, ages 10 and 8, sat across from Lucy in the wagon bed. They wouldn't look at her. They hadn't spoken to her much since their father, Lucy's father, had died in that terrible mine accident 6 months ago. Lucy remembered that awful day like it was yesterday. The mine whistle had blown 3 long, sad blasts. That meant trouble. Big trouble. All the women in town had run toward the mine, their faces white with fear. Lucy had run too, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. When they pulled her father out, he was already gone. 23 other men died that day when the old mine shaft collapsed. The whole town cried together. But for Lucy, the world had ended. Her father had been the only person who really loved her after her mother died when Lucy was just 5 years old. He would sit with her every night before bed and tell her stories about brave girls who never gave up no matter how hard things got. He would brush her long brown hair and tell her she was his precious girl, his little sunshine. Now the wagon suddenly stopped. Lucy looked up, confused. They were in the middle of nowhere, just empty land, stretching out in all directions. A few trees stood nearby, and in the distance she could see a small town. But why were they stopping here? Helen climbed down from the wagon and walked to the back. Her face was cold and mean. "Get out," she said to Lucy. Lucy's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I said get out, take your things and get out of my wagon." Lucy's hands started shaking. But where am I supposed to go?" Helen's eyes were like ice. "That's not my problem anymore. I can't feed 4 mouths with no husband to bring home money. I got my own boys to think about. But Papa said you'd take care of me. He made you. Promise before he died." Helen laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. It was sharp and cruel. "Your papa's dead, girl. Dead men can't make me do nothing. Now get out before I drag you out." Lucy looked at Helen's 2 boys. Surely they would say something. Surely they would remember how her father had been good to them, how he had brought them candy from town and taught them to whittle wood animals. But they just stared at their hands. With tears burning her eyes, Lucy grabbed her small bundle of clothes and climbed down from the wagon. Everything she owned in the world fit in a piece of old cloth tied with string, 1 extra dress, some underclothing, a pair of worn-out shoes, and her mother's silver locket, the only thing she had left of the woman who gave birth to her. "Please," Lucy whispered. "I'll work hard. I'll help with cooking and cleaning. I won't eat much, I promise." But Helen was already climbing back onto the wagon. "You're old enough to take care of yourself now. Find work in town or something, just don't come looking for us." The wagon driver looked uncomfortable. He was a kind old man who had known Lucy's father. "Ma'am, maybe we should think about this. She's just a child." Helen's voice turned sharp, as a knife. "Drive this wagon, old man. That's what I'm paying you for, not to give me advice about my business." Lucy stood there in the dust watching the only family she had left in the world drive away. The wagon got smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny dot on the horizon. Then it was gone completely. The silence was terrible. No birds singing. No wind blowing. Just Lucy, alone on an empty trail with storm clouds gathering overhead. She sat down on a big rock and held her doll tight against her chest. This doll had been with her through everything. When her mother died, when her father worked long days in the mine, when Helen was mean to her. Now it was all she had left. Lucy tried to be brave like the girls in her father's stories, but the tears came anyway. Big hot tears that rolled down her cheeks and dropped onto the dusty ground. She cried for her father who would never again tell her she was his sunshine. She cried for her real mother who had died too young. And she cried for herself, a 12-year-old girl with nowhere to go and no one who cared if she lived or died. As the sun started to set, the storm clouds moved closer. Lucy could hear thunder rumbling in the distance. Soon it would rain, and she had no shelter. The small town she could see was still miles away, and she didn't know if her tired legs could carry her that far before the storm hit. But what choice did she have? She couldn't just sit on this rock forever. Her father had always told her that brave people kept moving forward even when they were scared, even when everything seemed hopeless. Lucy stood up and brushed the dust off her simple brown dress. It was the same dress she had worn to her father's funeral, and it was getting too small for her growing body. Her shoes had holes in them, and her stomach was already starting to growl with hunger. She looked down at her mother's locket, hanging on a thin chain around her neck. Inside was a tiny picture of her mother's face, the only way Lucy could remember what she looked like. Her father had given it to her on her 8th birthday and told her to never ever take it off. "Mama," Lucy whispered to the picture, "I don't know what to do. I'm scared and alone, and I don't think anyone in the whole world cares about me anymore." The thunder got louder, and Lucy felt the first drops of rain on her face. She picked up her bundle of belongings and started walking toward the distant town. Each step was hard because her legs felt shaky and weak, but she kept walking because that's what brave girls did in her father's stories. As she walked, Lucy made herself a promise. No matter what happened, no matter how hard things got, she would survive. She would find a way to take care of herself. And someday, when she was grown up and strong, she would make sure no other little girl ever got left alone on a dusty trail, with nowhere to go. The rain started coming down harder, soaking through her thin dress and making her hair stick to her face. But Lucy kept walking, one foot in front of the other, toward whatever future was waiting for her in that small town ahead. She didn't know it yet, but this terrible day, the worst day of her young life, was about to lead her toward something better than she could ever imagine. Sometimes the darkest moments come right before the most beautiful surprises. But right now, all Lucy knew was that she was cold, wet, scared, and completely alone in the world. And she had to find a way to survive the night. 3 weeks had passed since Helen left Lucy on that dusty trail, and every single day had been a fight just to stay alive. The small town of Cedar Falls had become Lucy's whole world now. But it wasn't a kind world for a 12-year-old girl, with no family and no money. Lucy had learned to sleep wherever she could find shelter. Sometimes it was behind the general store, curled up next to some old wooden crates. Other nights she found empty sheds or barns where farmers stored their tools. She always made sure to leave before sunrise so nobody would find her and chase her away. Food was the hardest part. Her stomach hurt all the time now, a deep aching pain that never went away. She had gotten good at finding wild berries growing along the creek behind town. She knew which ones were safe to eat because her father had taught her during their long walks in the woods. Sometimes she found apples that had fallen from trees, or vegetables that people had dropped from their wagons at the market. But berries and fallen apples weren't enough. Lucy was getting thinner every day. Her dress hung loose on her small frame, and she had to tie a piece of rope around her waist to keep it from falling off. Her face looked hollow, and her eyes seemed too big for her head. The people in town had started to notice her. Some looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the bakery, would sometimes give Lucy the bread that was too old to sell, but she always made Lucy work for it first. "Sweep my front steps," Mrs. Patterson would say, "and stack those flour sacks in the back room, then maybe I'll have something for you." Lucy never complained. She swept every speck of dust from those steps and stacked those heavy flour sacks even though her arms ached. When Mrs. Patterson finally gave her a small piece of stale bread, Lucy always said thank you like it was the finest meal in the world. The blacksmith, Mr. Johnson, sometimes let Lucy help him organize his tools in exchange for a few coins. It wasn't much money, but it was enough to buy a small piece of cheese or an apple from the market. Mr. Johnson was a big, quiet man with kind eyes. He never asked Lucy where she came from or where she slept at night. He just gave her work when he could and treated her with respect. But not everyone in town was kind. Some people whispered about her when they thought she couldn't hear. They called her names like that wild girl or the little vagrant, Some mothers would pull their children closer when Lucy walked by, as if being poor and alone was something that might spread like a sickness. Lucy tried not to let their words hurt her, but sometimes at night, when she was cold and hungry and scared, she would cry into her old cloth doll. She would whisper to it like it was a real friend, telling it about her day and how much she missed her father. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cold or even the mean words. The hardest part was the loneliness. Lucy felt like she was invisible most of the time, like she didn't matter to anyone in the world. She would watch families walking together, parents holding their children's hands, and her heart would ache with wanting something she could never have. One evening, as dark storm clouds gathered overhead, Lucy was looking for a place to spend the night. She had learned to watch the sky carefully. Rain meant trouble. When you had no real home, getting caught in a storm could be dangerous. She remembered seeing a big barn on the edge of town past the last row of houses. It belonged to some kind of ranch, she thought, because she had seen cowboys riding horses nearby. Lucy had been afraid to go there before, worried that the ranch hands might catch her and get angry. But tonight, with thunder already rumbling, in the distance she didn't have a choice. The barn was bigger than any building Lucy had ever seen except for the church in her old town. It was painted red, though the paint was old and peeling in some places. The doors were tall enough for a person on horseback to ride through. Lucy pressed her ear against the wood and listened carefully. She didn't hear any voices or movement inside. Slowly, she pushed open one of the big doors just wide enough to slip through. The barn was dark inside, but she could smell hay and leather and horses. Her eyes slowly got used to the darkness, and she could see tall stalls where horses slept and a hayloft up above where farm tools were stored. Lucy climbed up a wooden ladder to the hayloft. The hay was soft and sweet-smelling like summer meadows. For the first time in weeks, she had found a place that felt almost cozy. She made a little nest in the hay, pulled her thin shawl around her shoulders, and held her doll close. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Rain pounded on the barn roof like thousands of tiny hammers. Lightning flashed through the small windows and thunder crashed so loud it made the whole barn shake. But Lucy felt safer than she had in weeks. The hay was warm, the roof kept out the rain, and for once she wasn't afraid of being chased away in the middle of the night. She fell asleep thinking about her father's stories of brave girls who never gave up. In her dreams, she was warm and fed and loved, sitting by a fireplace while someone who cared about her brushed her hair and told her everything would be all right. Lucy woke up to the sound of voices. Sunlight was streaming through the barn windows, and she could hear men talking down below. Her heart started beating fast with fear. She had been found. "I'm telling you, boss, there's someone up in that loft," one voice said. "I can see where the hay's been moved around." "Well, let's have a look then," said another voice, deeper and older than the first. "Could be a drifter looking for a place to sleep. We've had trouble with that before." Lucy heard boots on the wooden ladder. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The hayloft only had one way down, and the men were already climbing up. All she could do was sit very still and hope somehow they wouldn't see her. A head appeared at the top of the ladder. It was a young cowboy with sandy hair and a friendly face. Behind him came an older man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. This man looked important, like someone who was used to being in charge. They both stared at Lucy for a long moment. She must have looked like a strange sight. A skinny little girl in a torn dress clutching a raggedy doll, sitting in a pile of hay like some kind of barn animal. The older man climbed the rest of the way up into the loft. His eyes weren't angry, like Lucy had expected. Instead, he looked surprised and maybe a little sad. "Well now," he said quietly. "What do we have here?" Lucy's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, mister. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I was just trying to get out of the rain. I'll leave right now if you want." But something strange happened. Instead of yelling at her or ordering her to get out, the man sat down in the hay across from her. His voice was gentle when he spoke. "What's your name, child?" "Lucy, sir." "And where's your family, Lucy?" Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she tried to be brave. I don't have any family anymore, sir. My papa died in the mine accident, and my stepmother, she said she couldn't take care of me anymore." The two men looked at each other. The older man's face got very serious. "How long have you been on your own?" "About 3 weeks, sir." The older man was quiet for a long time, just looking at Lucy with those sharp blue eyes. Finally, he stood up and brushed the hay off his pants. "Come on down from there, Lucy," he said. "I think it's time we had a proper talk." Lucy climbed down from the hayloft on shaky legs, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The older man with the sharp blue eyes watched her every move. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. His clothes were nicer than most folks in town wore, and his boots looked expensive and well cared for. The younger cowboy, who had introduced himself as Pete, helped Lucy down the last few rungs of the ladder. His face was kind, and he didn't seem angry about finding her in the barn. "This here's Mr. Richardson," Pete said quietly to Lucy. "He owns his whole ranch. Pretty much everything you can see from here to those mountains belongs to him." Lucy's stomach dropped even further. She had been caught sleeping in the barn of the richest man for miles around. Surely he would be furious. Rich people didn't get rich by being soft-hearted about vagrants and beggars. But Mr. Richardson didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful, like he was trying to solve a puzzle in his head. He walked slowly around the barn, his hands clasped behind his back, while Lucy stood frozen in place. "Pete, go get Mrs. Henderson from the house," Mr. Richardson said finally. "Tell her to bring some food and maybe some clothes that might fit this young lady." Lucy's eyes went wide. "Sir, you don't need to do that. I can take care of myself." "Mr." Richardson stopped walking and looked at her directly. "Child, when's the last time you had a real meal?" Lucy thought about it. The piece of stale bread from Mrs. Patterson yesterday morning seemed like a feast compared to most days. "I eat every day, sir. I find berries and things." "That's not what I asked." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "When did you last sit down at a table and eat until your belly was full?" Lucy's chin trembled, but she lifted it up bravely. "I don't rightly remember, sir. But I'm not looking for charity. I work for what I need." Something changed in Mr. Richardson's face when she said that. His expression softened, and for just a moment he looked almost sad. "What kind of work have you been doing?" "Sweeping steps, stacking flour sacks, organizing tools, whatever folks need done." Lucy's voice got stronger as she talked about working. "I'm not afraid of hard work, sir. My papa always said an honest day's work was nothing to be ashamed of." "Your papa sounds like he was a good man. He was the best man in the whole world." Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "He died trying to save other men in that mine collapse. The whole town said he was a hero." Mr. Richardson was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down on a wooden crate, which brought him closer to Lucy's eye level. "Tell me what happened after your father died." So Lucy told him everything. About Helen's cold treatment and harsh words. About being left on the trail with nothing but her small bundle of clothes. About the 3 weeks of sleeping in barns and eating berries and trying to make herself invisible in town. Mr. Richardson listened to every word without interrupting. When Lucy finished her story, he was quiet for so long that she wondered if she had said something wrong. "Lucy," he said finally. "How old are you?" 12, sir. 13 next month." "Do you know how to read and write?" Lucy nodded. "My papa taught me. He said education was the most important thing a person could have because nobody could ever take it away from you." "Can you do sums, work with numbers?" "Yes, sir. Papa used to let me help him figure out the household money sometimes." Mr. Richardson stood up and walked to the barn door, looking out at his vast ranch. Lucy could see green pastures stretching as far as the eye could see, with hundreds of cattle grazing peacefully. There were several other buildings, a big house, smaller cabins for the ranch hands, and corrals where beautiful horses ran free. "I'm going to make you an offer, Lucy," Mr. Richardson said, still looking out at his land. "But I want you to think carefully before you answer, because once you say yes, there's no going back." Lucy's heart started beating faster again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from hope. And hope was almost more frightening than fear because it hurt so much when it got crushed. I want to adopt you as my daughter, give you my name, make you part of my family. You'd live in the big house, have your own room, eat at my table every day. I'd make sure you got a proper education, maybe even send you to school back east when you're older. Lucy's legs suddenly felt weak, and she had to grab onto a wooden post to keep from falling down. Sir, I don't understand. Why would you want to do that for me? Mr. Richardson turned around and Lucy was shocked to see tears in his tough old eyes. Because 20 years ago I had a daughter about your age. Her name was Catherine, and she was the light of my life. She died of fever one winter, and my wife died giving birth to our second child the following year. Since then, this big house has been empty except for me and the housekeeper. I've been alone for a very long time, Lucy. Lucy's hand went to her mother's locket, hanging around her neck. But sir, you don't even know me. What if I'm not a good daughter? What if I disappoint you? Mr. Richardson walked over and knelt down in front of her so they were eye to eye. Child, in the last hour, you've shown me more courage and honesty than most grown men show in a lifetime. You didn't beg or make up stories to get my sympathy. You told me the truth, even when it was hard. You talked about working for what you need, instead of asking for handouts. Those are the qualities of a person worth knowing. Lucy's mind was spinning. Could this really be happening? After 3 weeks of thinking she was completely alone in the world, was this man really offering to be her family? What would I have to do? She asked quietly. Just be yourself. Go to school. Help around the house if you want to. Learn how to run a ranch if that interests you. Most importantly, let me teach you that you're worth caring about. Let me give you the life your father would have wanted for you. Lucy thought about her father's stories of brave girls who never gave up. She thought about all those nights when she had wished for just one person in the world who would care if she lived or died. And now here was this man, this stranger, offering her not just survival but a real home and family. Sir, what if your family and friends don't like having me around? What if they think you're making a mistake? Mr. Richardson's face got serious. I won't lie to you, Lucy. My sister-in-law Victoria lives in town and she's not going to be happy about this. She's been hoping I'd leave the ranch to her sons when I die. Some other folks might have opinions too. But this is my ranch, my house, and my decision. Anyone who has a problem with it can keep their thoughts to themselves. Just then, Pete came back with a middle-aged woman who must be Mrs. Henderson. She was carrying a tray of food that smelled so good Lucy's stomach growled loudly. There was also a bundle of clean clothes draped over her arm. This is the child you told me about, Mrs. Henderson asked, looking at Lucy with kind eyes. Poor little thing, she's skinny as a rail. Mrs. Henderson has been taking care of this house since my wife died, Mr. Richardson explained to Lucy. If you decide to stay, she'll help you get settled in. Lucy looked at the food, then at the clean clothes, then at Mr. Richardson's hopeful face. She thought about sleeping in hay and eating berries for the rest of her life. She thought about her father and what he would want her to do. Yes, sir, she whispered. I'd like to be your daughter, if you really mean it. Mr. Richardson smiled then, the first real smile Lucy had seen from him. I really mean it. Welcome home, Lucy Richardson. 2 years had passed since that stormy night when Lucy found shelter in Mr. Richardson's barn, and she could hardly believe how much her life had changed. The skinny, frightened girl who used to sleep in hay and eat berries was gone. In her place stood a confident 14-year-old young woman who could ride horses, balance ranch books, and hold her own in conversations with the most important people in 3 counties. The big house that had once seemed impossibly grand now felt like home. Lucy's room was on the 2nd floor, with windows that looked out over the rolling pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. She had her own desk where she did her lessons with Miss Caroline, the tutor Mr. Richardson had hired from back east. Her closet was full of pretty dresses, and her bookshelf held more books than she had ever dreamed of owning. But the best part wasn't the fancy room or the nice clothes. The best part was sitting at the dinner table every evening with the man she now called Papa, talking about her day and listening to his stories about running the ranch. He treated her opinions like they mattered, asking her what she thought about everything from which horses to buy to how to handle difficult neighbors. Lucy had discovered she had a real talent for numbers and business. When Papa showed her the ranch ledgers, she could spot mistakes that even the accountant in town had missed. She suggested ways to save money on feed and equipment that impressed all the ranch hands. Some of the cowboys who had been working the land for 20 years started coming to her for advice. "That girl's got a head for business like I ain't never seen," Old Pete would tell anyone who'd listen. "She can look at a column of numbers and tell you exactly where every penny went. And she's got ideas too, smart ones that actually work." But not everyone was happy about Lucy's success. Victoria Hartwell, Mr. Richardson's sister-in-law, lived in town and had been watching Lucy's rise with growing anger and resentment. Victoria was a sharp-faced woman in her 40s who dressed in expensive clothes and thought very highly of herself. She had 2 sons, Thomas and William, who were about Lucy's age but lazy and spoiled. Victoria had always assumed that when Mr. Richardson died, he would leave his vast ranch to her boys since he had no children of his own. The arrival of Lucy had ruined all her plans, and she wasn't the type of woman to accept defeat quietly. "It's not natural," Victoria would whisper to her friends at church. "Taking in some wild girl from the streets and treating her like she's blood family. Mark my words, that child will bring nothing but trouble to our family." Victoria's whispers grew louder when Lucy started wearing nice dresses and riding in the family carriage. When word got around town that Mr. Richardson was paying for an expensive tutor and talking about sending Lucy to a finishing school back east, Victoria's anger turned into action. She started spreading rumors about Lucy's past, making up stories about her stealing from people in town before Mr. Richardson took her in. She told anyone who would listen that Lucy was just pretending to be grateful while she planned to rob the old man blind and run off with his money. Most people in town knew better than to believe Victoria's lies. They had seen Lucy grow from a scared, hungry child into a polite, hard-working young woman. But some folks started looking at Lucy differently, whispering behind their hands when she walked by. The rumors hurt Lucy's feelings, but she tried not to let them show. Papa had taught her that people who spread lies usually did it because they were unhappy with their own lives. Still, it was hard to hold her head high when she heard people talking about her like she was some kind of criminal. Things got much worse when Helen and her 2 boys came back to town. Lucy was in the general store with Mrs. Henderson, buying supplies for the ranch, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, look what we have here." Lucy's blood turned to ice. She turned around slowly and saw Helen standing there with a mean smile on her face. Helen's boys, now 12 and 10, stood behind their mother looking uncomfortable. Helen had heard the rumors about Lucy's good fortune, and she had come back to Cedar Falls with a plan. If Lucy was living like a rich girl now, Helen figured she deserved a piece of that wealth. After all, she had been Lucy's stepmother, which surely gave her some legal rights. "Hello, Helen," Lucy said quietly, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Don't you?" "Hello, Helen me, you ungrateful little brat," Helen snapped, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "I took care of you for months after. Your father died, and this is how you repay me? Running off and leaving us with nothing while you live high and mighty in that big house?" Lucy felt her face get hot. "You didn't take care of me. You left me on the side of the road with nothing but the clothes on my back." "I did what I had to do to survive," Helen shot back. "A woman alone with 2 children can't afford to feed extra mouths. But now I hear you're living like a princess while we've been struggling just to put food on the table." Mrs. Henderson stepped closer to Lucy, her face stern. "Ma'am, I think you'd better leave this child alone," but Helen ignored her. "This child belongs with her real family. I'm her legal guardian and I want her back, along with whatever money she's managed to get out of that old fool Richardson." By now, everyone in the store was staring. Lucy felt trapped and scared, just like she had that day on the trail 2 years ago. But she wasn't the same frightened 12-year-old anymore. She was Lucy Richardson now, and she had learned to stand up for herself. "I don't belong to you," Lucy said, her voice getting stronger. "Mr. Richardson legally adopted me. I'm his daughter. Now, not your responsibility." Helen's face turned red with anger. "We'll see about that. I'm going to talk to a lawyer. You can't just steal children and pretend they're yours. Blood is blood, and you're my stepdaughter whether you like it or not. The confrontation in the store was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Helen made good on her threat. She found a lawyer who was willing to challenge Lucy's adoption, claiming that she had never given proper consent for Lucy to be taken away from her family. The legal battle was messy and painful. Helen's lawyer argued that Mr. Richardson had taken advantage of a child's desperation to essentially buy himself a daughter. They painted Lucy as a victim who had been brainwashed into thinking she was happy in her new life. Victoria saw her chance and started supporting Helen's case, providing money for legal fees, and spreading even more rumors around town. She told everyone who would listen that this proved Lucy was nothing but trouble, just like she had always said. The stress of the situation started taking a toll on both Lucy and Papa. He hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the case dragged on. For months, Lucy had nightmares about being forced to go back to Helen, about losing the only real home she had ever known. "What if they make me leave?" she asked Papa one evening as they sat in his study by the fireplace. "What if the judge decides I have to go back to Helen?" Papa put down his newspaper and looked at her with those kind blue eyes that had first given her hope in the barn 2 years ago. "Lucy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. No matter what happens in that courtroom, you are my daughter. Not because some paper says so, but because I choose you and you choose me. Nobody can ever take that away from us." Lucy felt tears in her eyes, but they were different from the scared tears she used to cry. These were tears of gratitude for having someone who would fight for her no matter what. "I choose you too, Papa," she whispered. "You're the best father any girl could ask for." The legal battle was far from over, but Lucy felt stronger knowing that she wasn't facing it alone. She had learned that family wasn't just about blood or legal papers. Real family was about people who loved you enough to stand by you when times got tough. And she was about to learn just how much love and support she really had in this small Montana town. The courthouse in Cedar Falls had never seen so many people packed into one room. It seemed like half the town had come to witness the final hearing in the case that had everyone talking. Lucy sat between Papa Richardson and his lawyer, trying to keep her hands from shaking as she watched Helen and her boys take their seats across the aisle. Judge Morrison was a fair man who had known the Richardson family for 20 years. He had listened to weeks of testimony, reviewed all the legal papers, and heard arguments from both sides. Today, he would decide whether Lucy would stay with the man she considered her real father, or be forced to return to the woman who had abandoned her on a dusty trail. But before Judge Morrison could make his final ruling, something unexpected happened that changed everything. 3 days earlier, Papa Richardson had collapsed while checking on the cattle in the far pasture. Pete and the other ranch hands found him lying unconscious in the grass, his face pale and his breathing shallow. They rushed him back to the house where Dr. Mitchell examined him and delivered frightening news. "His heart is weak," the doctor told Lucy privately. The stress of this legal battle combined with his age has taken a serious toll. He needs complete rest and no worries if he's going to recover. Lucy felt like her world was crashing down around her. Not only might she lose her home and family in court, but now she might lose Papa to illness as well. The man who had saved her life and given her everything was fighting for his own life, and it was partly her fault. "This is all because of me," Lucy whispered to Mrs. Henderson as they sat by Papa's bedside. "If he hadn't adopted me, none of this would be happening. Victoria and Helen would have left him alone." Mrs. Henderson took Lucy's hand in her weathered ones. "Child, that man has been alone in this big house for 20 years. You brought him more joy than he's had since his own daughter died. Don't you dare blame yourself for other people's greed and meanness." For the next 3 days, Lucy barely left Papa's side. She read to him from his favorite books, helped Mrs. Henderson bring him soup and medicine, and managed all the ranch business so he wouldn't have to worry about anything. She worked with the ranch hands to make sure the cattle were fed and the horses were cared for. She balanced the books and paid the bills, handling everything with a skill that amazed even the most experienced cowboys. Word of Lucy's devotion spread quickly through the small town. People who had been listening to Victoria's rumors saw a different side of the story. They watched a 14-year-old girl take on the responsibilities of running one of the largest ranches in the territory, all while nursing the man she called father back to health. Mrs. Patterson from the bakery, who had given Lucy stale bread during her weeks of homelessness, came to visit with fresh baked goods. "I've been watching that girl," she told Mrs. Henderson. "She's got more character in her little finger than most grown folks have in their whole body." Mr. Johnson, the blacksmith who had given Lucy work for pennies, showed up at the ranch with offers to help however he could. "That young lady never once complained about hard work," he said. "If Mr. Richardson trusts her to run his ranch, that's good enough for me." Even some of the people who had been influenced by Victoria's gossip started changing their minds. They saw Lucy in town, handling business with dignity and maturity far beyond her years. They saw how the ranch hands respected her, and how she treated everyone with kindness regardless of their position. On the morning of the final court hearing, Papa Richardson was feeling well enough to attend, though Dr. Mitchell had warned him to avoid any excitement. Lucy helped him get dressed in his best suit and made sure he took his medicine before they left for town. As they walked into the courthouse, Lucy was amazed to see how many people had come to support them. Pete and the other ranch hands filled an entire row. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Johnson were there along with dozens of other townspeople. Even Miss Caroline, Lucy's tutor, had traveled from the next county to be present. Helen's lawyer presented his final arguments, claiming that blood family was more important than legal documents and that Lucy belonged with her real relatives, regardless of what had happened in the past. He painted Papa Richardson as a lonely old man who had been manipulated by a clever child into providing for her. But when Papa Richardson's lawyer called his witnesses, the real story came out. One by one, people from the town stood up to speak about what they had seen over the past 2 years. Pete testified about Lucy's hard work and natural leadership with the ranch hands. "That girl can outwork most men twice her age," he said. "And she treats everyone fair and square, no matter if they're the newest hand or been here 20 years. Mrs. Henderson spoke about Lucy's character and devotion to Papa Richardson. "I've seen a lot of children in my time," she said, "but I've never seen one with such a good heart. She didn't care about his money or his big house. She just wanted someone to love her, and she gave that love right back." Right. Miss Caroline testified about Lucy's intelligence and eagerness to learn. "In all my years of teaching, I've rarely encountered a student so dedicated to bettering herself. She studies not for personal gain, but because she wants to honor the opportunities she's been given." Even Dr. Mitchell spoke on Lucy's behalf, describing how she had cared for Papa Richardson during his illness, with the skill and devotion of a loving daughter. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Thomas, one of Helen's own sons, stood up in the courtroom with tears in his eyes. "Your Honor," he said in a shaky voice, "I need to tell the truth about what really happened. My mother didn't just leave Lucy on that trail because we were poor. She planned it for weeks. She said Lucy wasn't her real daughter and she didn't want to be bothered with her anymore. She was mean to Lucy every day after her father died, calling her names and making her sleep in the barn sometimes." Helen's face went white with shock and anger, but Thomas continued. "Lucy never did anything wrong. She just wanted someone to care about her. When we heard she was living good now, Mother got jealous and wanted to take it away from her. But Lucy deserves to be happy. She deserves to have a family that loves her." The courtroom was completely silent when Thomas finished speaking. Helen's lawyer looked defeated, and Helen herself couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Judge Morrison took a long look around the packed courtroom, then at Lucy, then at Papa Richardson. When he spoke, his voice was firm and clear. "In my 30 years, on this bench I have rarely seen a case where the truth was so obvious. This young woman has found her true home, not through accident of birth, but through mutual love, respect, and choice. The adoption stands. Lucy Richardson will remain with her chosen father, where she clearly belongs." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Lucy felt Papa Richardson's hand squeeze hers and she saw tears of joy in his eyes. Mrs. Henderson was crying happy tears, and the ranch hands were whooping like they'd just won the biggest cattle drive of their lives. Helen and her lawyer left quickly, but Thomas lingered behind. He approached Lucy with his head down. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have told the truth a long time ago." Lucy surprised him by giving him a hug. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up," she said. "That took courage." 5 years later, Lucy stood on the front porch of the big house, now a confident 19-year-old woman who had become one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. Papa Richardson, fully recovered from his illness, stood beside her as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors over their vast land. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Lucy had introduced new breeding techniques and business practices that increased their profits every year. She had also started a program to help other orphaned children in the territory, providing them with work, education, and hope for the future. Victoria had eventually moved away from Cedar Falls, unable to face the fact that her schemes had failed so completely. Helen had never bothered Lucy again after the trial, disappearing from their lives as suddenly as she had reappeared. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Pete hadn't found you in that barn?" Papa asked as they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Lucy smiled, fingering her mother's locket that still hung around her neck. "Sometimes," she said, "but then I remember something you taught me. We can't change the past, but we can choose how to write our future." Papa Richardson put his arm around her shoulders. "I'm proud of you, daughter, not because of how successful you've become, but because of the kind of person you are. Your father would be proud too." Lucy looked out over the land that had become her true home. Surrounded by the family she had chosen and who had chosen her in return, she had learned that home wasn't a place you were born into, but a place where you were loved, valued, and free to become the best version of yourself. From a scared, abandoned child on a dusty trail to a successful ranch owner and respected member of the community, Lucy had discovered that sometimes the worst moments in life are just the beginning of the most beautiful chapters, and this was only the start of her story.